So welcome to the hunt. Welcome to D.B. Cooper. Welcome to the only unsolved skyjacking in the history of the United States. Let me tell you a little bit about the skyjacking, then I'll tell you a little bit about me, how I got into the story, what I've been doing, what I found, and what I think still needs to be done. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Hey, hello there. Hey, come on in. Yeah, we're just getting going here. I'm taking my first breath here. I'm going to reverse it a little bit about how I got started on this. When D.B. Cooper stole his airplane, 1971, 45 years ago this month, I was in college. I was 22, and there was a skyjacking like every other week, and it was all fly me to Cuba kind of stuff, you know. And so when I heard about this D.B. Cooper out in Pacific Northwest, it was like, another guy stole another airplane, wasn't a big deal. Oh, he jumped out of an airplane. Oh, really? That's cool, you know. But I didn't think much of it. There was other things on my mind, so like getting a girlfriend or something. And it wasn't till I came out here and was writing for the Dispatch. And hello there. And they made it. This is Wayne. Okay, this is who we were waiting for. We can't start until Wayne gets here. All right, so welcome, Wayne and Mandy. So I was writing for the Dispatch, and I was the Graham reporter, and my editor said, listen, this is a little out of your coverage area, but there's going to be an air show and a car show up at Thun Field, Pierce County Airport. Why don't you cover it? And it'll be in a lot of nice pictures. See, my editor's like, we'll put some of the planes on the front page. We'll sell a few more papers. So I came up, and one of the planes was really cool. It was a Fairchild 24. And back in the day, in the 1930s, it was like the Rolls Royce of airplanes. And I had made a model of it when I was a kid. I loved building models as a kid. And this was the first balsa wood job I had ever made. So now I'm seeing one in real life. And it's beautifully restored. And I'm looking in, wow, it even has a little rose bud vase in the back seat. It's really looks great. And the owner walks over and he says, hey, you like the plane? I go, yeah, it's really cool. And I just told him, when I was a kid, yeah. And he says, yeah, well, this is my plane. I restored it. Oh, wow, you did a great job. Thanks. We're talking, and it's like a really hot day. He says, let's get under the shade, under the wing. We'll go in the shade. We sit down in some chairs. And he says, you want an ice cold Coke? And he opens up the cooler. It's like, yeah, great. Oh, it tastes good. On the ground, I see this book that says, D.B. Cooper, legend, blah, 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 death, blah, 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 natural causes. And I'm going, D.B. Cooper, hey, Ron, you into D.B. Cooper? He said, my wife and I just wrote that book. It got published last week. Whoa! And it was the story of Barb Dayton, who was one of the first of the 900 people to confess to being D.B. Cooper. And she also confessed to being the first gender reassignment surgery recipient in Washington State, having been Bobby until 1969. And the story is of her confessing to being D.B. Cooper and reverting to her male persona 2 years after her sex change operation, stealing the airplane, and confessing to a group of Thunfield pilots in 1976, and shocking her friends like, oh my God, and you had a sex change operation too? Oh my God, double. And so Ron and Pat Foreman wrote their book. Highly recommend it. The library should cover it, carry it, I believe they do. And it's called The Legend of D.B. Cooper, Death by Natural Causes. It is an excellent description of how you could steal an airplane and get away with it. Do I think Barb is D.B. Cooper? No, but I think it's a great story, and I think you should read it. I sure hope that the library system has plenty of copies. So here's the story, and you can begin to fill in the blanks. Who do you think D.B. Cooper is? Night before Thanksgiving, 1971, right about this time, actually. A guy by the name of Dan Cooper. He was a middle-aged looking nondescript businessman wearing a black suit, tie, slacks. Had a little briefcase, had a little raincoat over his arm, bought a ticket in Portland Airport, $20 to fly to Seattle. And the plane that was coming in, that is now known to history as Northwest Orient Flight 305, was due in at 2:30 in the afternoon, but it had been stopping at lots of airports across Minneapolis, Great Falls, Minnesota, Missoula, Coeur d'Alene, Spokane, and now Portland. It was running a little late. The guy says, "It's a 727, right?" And the ticket counter guy goes, "Yeah, it's a 727, but it's running late. It'll be in about 3 o'clock." And it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So he just hung out, stood out by the windows by himself. And plane comes in, he loads up, and the 727 was an unusual plane. Has anybody flown a 727? You have, okay. Have you, Bill? All right. Did you walk on board using the staircase? Do you remember that? Huh?
I was in a chair. It was a small plane.
It is a small plane.
The smallest one, yeah.
It's one of the smallest built by Boeing, and it was built for small airports, and it was built with its own staircase in it, because back in the 60s and 70s, when these planes were built, and a lot of them were built and a lot of them were flying, they were designed to go to small airports before jetways. Does everybody know what a jetway is? It's the walkway when you're walking down from your waiting area and you're going to walk on a plane. That corridor that you walk down actually, and usually there's a turn somewhere, because it articulates and it can move to whatever kind of plane is coming in. And before those were ubiquitous in all the airports, how you would get on an airplane was you'd have to walk out of the terminal and walk on the runway. They call it a tarmac. And you'd go to the airport, and then they would usually roll up some stairs, and you'd climb up the stairs and you'd be in the plane. So to bypass all of that encumbrance, Boeing said, "We're going to build your plane with stairs already in them. Just slow them down. You can walk right up. And you can walk out." Perfect. Alaska Airlines loved them because they're flying to all the boony places up in Alaska. They don't even have paved runways. They land on dirt runways. So forget about having staircases. So they loved the 727. Now, when D.B. Cooper got on his 727, as soon as they were rolling down the runway in Portland, he handed the stewardess, he was sitting in the last seat, he hands her a note. She thinks he's trying to pick her up because she is former Miss Arkansas. She takes the book, puts it in her pocket. They take off. He looks back, "Miss, I think you need to look at the note." "Oh my God. You're being hijacked. I want you to sit next to me." She sits down. He opens up his briefcase, sticks of dynamite, wires, batteries. He says, "I'm hijacking the plane. I want you to write this down. I want $200,000 in cash, and I want 4 parachutes. I want 2 back and 2 front." She writes it down. At that point, she's freaking out. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." The other stewardess, her name is, that woman's name is Florence. Tina is the youngest crew member. She's the junior member of the crew. She walks over and goes, "Hey, what's going on?" "Oh, we're getting hijacked." She gets on the phone. It's called an interphone, I believe. It's not called an intercom. She calls the captain up in the cockpit. "We're being hijacked. Got a guy back here in the bomb. He looks serious." Florence, who is sitting down, she goes up to the cockpit. The guy flying the plane actually told me that when Florence came into the cockpit, she couldn't talk, and this is her words, "He dropped the note in Scotty's lap." That was Captain Scott. Scott, the guy he was flying, he freaks out. Radacek, the guy I was talking to, has to take the controls of the plane so they don't crash. They'd just taken off from the airport, so they're at about 3,000 or 4,000 feet and climbing at about 300 miles an hour, trying to get up to altitude. So things are pretty dicey right off the bat. Tina takes over back in Action Central, keeps him cool, calm, and collected, spends the next 5 hours in his company, and is credited with keeping everybody alive. I find this very emotional. So, anyway. Plane lands. Cooper says, I won't let you land until all the money and parachutes are at SeaTac. So they have to circle around Seattle for about 2 hours. FBI rounds things up. We got everything. Unbeknownst to most people until very recently, the case has become resurgent in the last 10 years for a couple reasons. One, the big reason is the internet. It's impossible for law enforcement to keep a secret pretty much anymore because guys like me find a way around them. And chat rooms and Google and all of that, we can exchange a lot of information. And for those of us who are more persistent, we are downright pushy. And so the only way to control us is to avoid us totally, which is why none of the FBI guys talk to me. So the money, the FBI, to their credit, had already anticipated this kind of crime happening. So they had begun stockpiling monies all over the country. And it's estimated now that they had stockpiled at least $200,000 in cash in at least 200 banks near field offices, so that if there was ever a hostage situation, and it didn't have to be a skyjacked airplane. It could be somebody holed up in a pizza place and he's got the waitress with a gun to her head and no one leaves until I get my money. Whatever it was, they didn't have to wait. Well, it's Friday afternoon. We'll have the banks don't open until Monday, so we can't get you any money. And it's like, no, we don't want that. We don't want money to be the issue. We want other things to be the issue. So the money was stockpiled. The money got there right away. And the parachutes were to follow. And the exchange takes place. And the FBI, in that era, played hardball. And the airlines had a very uneven relationship with the FBI. And in all the other skyjackings that were taking place, sometimes the airlines colluded with the skyjacker to make sure that the FBI didn't shoot up the plane. The airlines wanted, their perspective was, what's the cheapest way to get out of this? Cheapest way to get out of a skyjacking is you fly him wherever he wants to go. When he gets off the plane, you fly all your disgruntled passengers back to wherever they want to go, and you give them a free hotel. Everything's good, okay? What you don't want is any dead bodies or your plane with a lot of holes in it. So the FBI and Northwest Orient kind of did this dance. And the FBI started to monkey around with the refueling. And Bill Radacek, the man I was talking to, the guy who actually was flying the plane when D.B. Cooper jumped out, told me, he says, I had to raise my voice and I put my foot down and they started refueling it. And things went along and they were on the ground for a couple hours. At 7:30 in the evening, the night before Thanksgiving, they take off. And they don't know where they're going to go. And as they're taking off, Cooper says, fly me to Mexico. And they said, well, we can't get there. Not with the metrics that you've given us on how to fly there. And he gave them very unusual metrics. Don't want you to go over 10,000 feet. Want you to leave the wheels down. Want you to set the wing flaps at 15 degrees. Now, planes fly because the wings are curved, and you've heard of lift. So if the jet, basically what an airplane is a giant glider with a huge jet engine to push air past the engine. And is the air comes over a curved wing, it creates lift, and the plane rises. And the greater your curvature is, the greater lift you have. And so if you fly a plane with a lot of curve, you can fly at relatively slow speeds. So he said, set your wing flaps at 15, don't fly over 200 miles an hour, which is perfect conditions for a parachute departure. D.B. Cooper, when they take off, said, I want to lower the staircase. Before they take off, he says, I want to lower the staircase. He says, no, we can't take off with the staircase down. And then they realized, he's got parachutes, he's going to jump out. Oh my God. So the pilots are freaking, and they call their bosses at Northwest Orient in the hub in Minneapolis, say, we got a guy who's going to jump out of the airplane. He's got parachutes, he wants the staircase down. What are we going to do? Can we fly a plane? Northwest Orient Flight Operations didn't know. We'll call Boeing. We'll get back to you. Called Boeing. It's like, this is the day before Thanksgiving. It's like, you want to what? Hey, yeah, flight with the 727. Well, yeah, we'll get back to you on that. You know, it's like there was a hell of a lot of phone calls going back and forth. Eventually, the CIA got involved, got connected by Boeing through the FBI, who then told Northwest Orient, the CIA is saying they do this all the time over in Vietnam. Yeah, you can fly the 727 with the staircase down. Tell your pilots don't do it exactly the way he's saying. He set it up perfect. Northwest Orient goes, holy shamoly. They call the pilots, you're good to go, buddy. You're kidding me. No, we're not. Cooper knows what he's doing. When the pilot told me, when he realized, he said, boy, I really knew he was a smart guy. So, as it turns out, I believe this is the premier piece of evidence that Cooper knew more about the plane than the pilots or their bosses or anybody at Northwest Orient. And they had to go through multiple chains of information to get to top secret levels of information. In an emergency situation, that was not easy to do. So, the pilots, they're 40 minutes into the flight, and Cooper, as it turns out, doesn't know how. So they refuse to take off with the steps down. Cooper decides, okay, we won't argue about it. I'll lower the staircase in flight. So they take off. 40 minutes later, he has Tina on board, the flight attendant, the flight attendant who was sitting next to him. He keeps her on board. He realizes that they have communication, they have some rapport, you can trust her. She's not going to freak out. She's cool, calm, and collected. She's a good gal. Cooper asks her, how do you lower the staircase? And he thought that the staircase had to be released through a device in the cockpit, because that's how the military version of a 727 releases its staircase. But Tina said, no, we just have a lever. We just push it forward like that. He says, show me. So they go back to the plane. He says, here's the lever. You just push it from this way to that way. That's it. He says, there's no release? No, you just push it. Okay, you can go up. I got it from here. So Cooper knew a lot about the plane, but there was one element he did not know. He clearly had jumped from a 727 before, but he had never lowered the staircase. That's piece of evidence number 2 that I think is highly critical. 40 minutes later, the pilots report that Cooper has been by himself for at least a half hour. And all of a sudden, the plane starts to curtsy, is what the pilots described it, which means it started bouncing. And what they believe is that Cooper had thrown the lever, the staircase comes down, and in the wind it starts bouncing up and down, kind of like a loose springboard, kind of like a diving board kind of thing. And then there was a big whoomph, and they believe that's when he walked down to the bottom of the stairs and jumped off. And when he jumped off, it came all the way back up and slammed into the fuselage, pushed a big wave of air into the plane, and they call that the pressure bump. The cockpit instrumentation recorded the bump, the pressure bump, and the plane really began to rock, and they had to really control it and, in their terms, trim it out. And that happened at 8:13 in the evening, and that's the last anybody knows about D.B. Cooper to this day. Here's what I think happened next. I can tell you some of the things. So the search begins immediately. Planes had been following from SeaTac. McCord sent a couple planes up. National Guard sent a couple planes up. But it was raining, and they're only flying at 10,000 feet, so they're in the clouds, and nobody can see nothing. Whatever the radar recorded is not known publicly to this day, which is like mystery number one. How come nobody knows nothing about that? Okay? And that begins the suspicion. If you like conspiracies, that's a good place to start, okay? But there's lots of other places you can jump into, and we'll get to that stuff. So, one way or the other, Cooper is out of the plane at 8:13. He's on the ground, alive or dead, we don't know, but he's on the ground by 8:30. But nobody knows where. They know he left the plane at 8:13. But where was the plane? I don't know. Well, don't you have it on radar? Well, we know it was 75 miles south of SeaTac, but we don't know if it was kind of like straight south or maybe a little to the left, maybe a little to the right. You know, where does the pilot think he was? He said, well, he's not quite sure. Well, when you're flying a commercial aircraft at 10,000 feet south of Seattle, because of all the mountains, unbeknownst, most people think a plane can fly anywhere they want. The truth of the matter is planes are tightly constricted. They have to fly basically roadways in the air. And FAA controllers, that's what flight controllers tell them to do. And usually these air corridors are at certain elevations, and they're only maybe 4, 5, or 6, 7, 8 miles wide, and you have to stay within that air corridor. Coming south out of Seattle, no higher than 10,000 feet, you're in an air corridor called Victor 23. Victor 23 flies over Ariel, Washington, and then downtown Portland. It is widely believed, and the FBI believes, that the airplane was in Victor 23. But they don't have any confirming evidence because there's no radar confirmation. But that's where planes should be at 10,000 feet. So we're guessing, as it seems. Now, they found some stuff. They found a laminate card with instructions that says, to open staircase, push lever forward. All right? So D.B. Cooper didn't even read the instructions. Okay? That was found by an elk hunter 5 years later in the area of Victor 23. So that was the first conclusive report. See, we thought it was Victor 23. It probably was Victor 23. And so the FBI began looking in a projected area. Well, if he was 40 minutes south and he's in Victor 23, 8:13, that would put him right over the area, kind of like Battleground, Washington, a little north of Vancouver. You know where Battleground is? Okay, it's maybe 20 miles, 25 miles north of Vancouver, about 30 miles north of Portland, something like that. The wind was coming from the southwest, you know, it was raining out, it was kind of blowy, it wasn't that gusty, so maybe he drifted a little to the northeast. So, takes him 10 minutes, 10,000 feet. Takes a minute for every 1,000 feet of elevation. Takes him 10 minutes or so to get to the ground. 30-mile-per-hour winds from the southwest, that's probably going to push him maybe 4 or 5 miles to the northeast. If he leaves at Battleground, that's probably going to put him at Ariel, Amboy, somewhere around that, kind of right on the borderline between Lewis County and Cowlitz County, about 15, 20 miles east of the I-5. And that's where people started looking. But the next day's Thanksgiving. Maybe tomorrow. Ralph Himmelsbach, who was, most people think he was the case agent for D.B. Cooper. He wasn't. Ralph Himmelsbach was a field agent in the Portland FBI office who was assigned to skyjacking cases because he was a pilot. He was the first, he jumped in his private plane, Thanksgiving morning, 9 o'clock, starts looking over the aerial Amboy area, which got to be called Landing Zone A. This would be the primary area. And this was given to them by speculation coming out of Northwest Orient, going through the metrics that I just described to you. Wind coming from here, 15-minute down, you know, da. But no one goes walking, looking for him, because the FBI, the Bureau of Investigation, they wear the suits. They got nice shoes. Going in the woods, that's not what we do. What we do is we go to the airport, we look for surveillance tapes. Well, in 1971, not too much. Well, we're going to talk to cabbies. We're going to talk to waitresses. We're going to talk to bus drivers. We're going to talk to bellhops. We're going to talk to everybody who would have come in contact with D.B. Cooper at the Portland airport. We figured that's where we're going to get this guy. We're going to check out motels. We're going to check out hotels. We're going to check out, that's what we do. We're the guy with suits. The guys who don't have suits, they're the ones that get their shoes muddy in the woods. So it got outsourced. The ground search got outsourced. And who does the heavy lifting in law enforcement? You want to take a guess? Right, Sheriff's Department. Now they had 24 square miles, between 20 and 24 square miles of landing zone A. Cowlitz County has 20 deputies. So they called all their buddies, they called the fire department, they called anybody they could trust. They said, we got to go look for this skyjacker. They rustled up about 25 guys. They can't put every cop on it. They can't put every deputy. So they put half their force and they rustle up another couple dozen guys. And so there's maybe 30, 40 guys out in the woods looking in the Amboy area for D.B. Cooper. And they're tromping around. It's wet, it's cold, it's foggy, it's hard going. It's rough country in the area where the Cowlitz and Clark County come together. And if you know the area, aerial, Merwin Dam is right there, the Lewis River is running down there, and Lewis River is dammed up in this ravine in the Merwin Dam area, and it's quite steep. It looks kind of almost, you know, with snow, it kind of looks like the Alps or something like that. But generally, the Amboy area, area is pretty much rolling country. Farmlands, a lot of McMansions, a lot of cattle. It's very similar to Graham, Eatonville. Very similar kind of situations. A lot of 5-acre sites, things like that. And the ground teams don't get going in the woods looking for Cooper until Friday afternoon. That means Cooper had, and he's on the ground at 8:30 Wednesday. No one's looking for him until noon-ish on Friday. He has at least 40 hours before anybody's looking for him. And he had at least 13 hours before Himmelsbach got on his plane and flew over him. Now, the FBI has stated publicly that they didn't expect, first they didn't expect D.B. Cooper to actually jump. And they were surprised when the plane landed for a refueling stop in Reno. They expected D.B. Cooper to be on the plane, and he wasn't there. Where'd he go? I guess he jumped. Oh, son of a gun. I guess he's out there, isn't he? Yeah, we better go look for him. Okay, so their expectations were dashed. Now, this is the first kind of skyjack. This is the first crime of its kind that the FBI has encountered. There was no precedent for it. They weren't prepared for it. As we know from 9/11, the FBI does not do a good job of connecting the dots. Have you heard that phrase back in 9/11? Okay. Condoleezza Rice made that very famous kind of thing. Well, I'm here to tell you the FBI didn't do a good job connecting the dots in 1971 either, 40 years earlier. Or 30, was it 30 years? 30 years earlier, okay? They still don't. The FBI, this book and the D.B. Cooper case really shows you some of the limitations of a large bureaucratic police department. They do some things very well, and other things they don't do so well. complex cases that are original, creative, innovative, that involve multiple jurisdictions, chances are you're probably going to get away with it, because the bureaucracy just isn't going to figure it out in time to catch you. The reality in law enforcement is there are very few Lieutenant Olivia Bensons. There just aren't. There's not that many to go around. Really sharp cookies, confident, insightful, perceptive, creative, thinking out of the box, able to handle a lot of information and think about how this could have happened. So Cooper really had the upper hand. Ralph Himmelsbach again told me, he says, when Cooper had a bomb, we knew he was a smart cookie because that gave him the upper hand. He said, from our perspective, what we had was we had time on our side. We just had to wait for him to make a mistake. But the initial point of the crime, Cooper had the upper hand because the bomb prevented the FBI from doing what they love to do, which is rush from two ends of the plane, guns drawn, and have a gun battle. We get you. When the fight's our kind of fight, we're going to get you. We may shoot a few other people too and put holes in the plane, but that's another issue. But we're going to get you. With a bomb, you neutralize the ability of a weaponized attack like that. So they had to rethink the whole thing. We now know, jumping ahead a little bit more into conspiracy kind of thing, it is now believed, as a third edition of this book is coming out because of events that have taken place in the last year. One of the things that's taken place up until now is that the passengers aboard 305 were given a free ride by guys like me and by most of the media. They were pretty much left alone. Initially, on the night of the skyjacking, everybody wanted to hear their story. You were hijacked? Oh, wow, what was it like? Okay, did you see the guy? You didn't see the guy? Okay, kind of stuff like that. And after that, they were left alone. Now we're going back to visit their stories because we're finding that the passengers are telling a different story than the crew members. And it is now believed that this story that you have read in the papers is tightly controlled. First, it was controlled by Northwest Orient, who wanted to put the best spin on what was happening so that their public image wouldn't suffer. They didn't want people who were holding tickets to fly the next week to say, by the way, your D.B. Cooper's airplane, no, we're not flying, we're going to go United. No, they didn't want that, okay? So what they stressed was, we had the thing under control, we kept the skyjacker isolated, our stewardesses moved the passengers forward, we told them it was a mechanical problem, we had everything under control. They didn't. Somebody in the middle seats was getting drunk, they had to deal with him. They had another guy in uniform, he was freaking out. And then the FBI, when the exchange of parachutes and money, an FBI came on board, ready for the shootout. Whether we don't know to this day whether he was acting under orders, he was acting on his own. But we do know that an armed FBI agent was on board Flight 305 and SeaTac because he talked to one of the passengers, and the passenger he talked to was Larry Feingold, who was an assistant U.S. district attorney and knew the guy from the courts. And John and the agent, he says, can't remember his last name, but his first name was John, and he knew me. We recognized each other. He's walking down the aisle, and he says, yeah, there's a skyjacker on board. I'll be right back. I'll talk to you later. Well, somehow he got turned around and sent off the plane, and I believe the stewardess says, no, not on my shift, dude. You want to shoot out? You're going to have to pick another plane, all right? And he was dismissed, and he left without incident. And so the skyjacking, as D.B. Cooper envisioned it, continued. But that's how close we came to a shootout, and how close we came to a different kind of story. And that gives you a nature of how fluid and how unmanaged this whole thing was. And this is how large bureaucracies deal with emergencies. It gets a little sloppy pretty quickly. And you try to keep the dust down as long as you can. So anyway, Cooper gets his escape, and I'll jump ahead to the rest of the story is what do I think, and I will expand upon the information I've already given you. Cooper's information about the plane was top secret level. It is reasonable to assume that he learned that by being a commando, special ops, special forces, SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, pick it, whatever you want. The guys who do special ops for a living in special forces are convinced D.B. Cooper is one of them. One guy told me, he says, look, dude, Cooper was one of our guys. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. You know, he did it exactly the way we would do it. It was well planned, it was well rehearsed, he never lost his cool. He got the job done. He's our kind of boy. And if that's the case, then it's also reasonable to postulate that not only did Cooper have access to information, he also had access to other guys like him. So he could have fashioned an extraction team. Because something that's never talked about is, how did Cooper get away? He got to the ground, alive or dead. If he's alive, then what happened to him? They've never found a thing. No body, no parachute, no nothing. We'll talk about the little bit of money that was found 10 years later. But did he have trained commandos on the ground waiting for him with top-notch, state-of-the-art communication gear, medical equipment, change of clothes, thermos of coffee, you know, all the good stuff for the getaway? And I say that's possible. I don't say it's true, I just say it's possible. So that's my personal perspective. So nothing's been found, but let's talk about the money. And then we'll talk about the History Channel and the closing of the case, and then there'll be time for some questions, because we got to get out of here at 8 o'clock, right? Ish, 8-ish?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. You don't want to say things like that. Okay. Anyway. Okay. So money. So nothing was found. They went looking for a long time. 5 months after the case, now inexplicably, this begins to show some of the politics that's involved in the D.B. Cooper case. The hand of politics rears its. Well, it's not the hand. The face of ugly politics raises its up. 5 months later, they go looking for D.B. Cooper in force. Hundreds of soldiers from Fort Lewis get trucked down there. Dozens of FBI agents, everybody wearing a badge is out in the woods looking for D.B. Cooper. In April, he jumped in November at Thanksgiving. We're going to wait till April to go looking for him. Okay, everybody, let's go look for D.B. Cooper. I didn't find him. Well, what do you think? But they found 2 bodies, okay, both sexual assault victims from Portland, okay. It's kind of funny, you know, I grew up on Long Island, and they got the Newsweek magazine just did a big thing on all the bodies they're finding at the beach. It's like, wow, I think 17 bodies they found down at Jones Beach. So anyway, in February of 1980, so this is 8.5 years later, a family from Oklahoma, guy's out of work, says, let's get out of here. We'll go see my sister up in Oregon. Comes up here, they're having a family picnic on a Sunday afternoon in February. And you don't have any money, you can buy some hot dogs. Where are you going to go? Oh, let's go down to the beach. They go down to a place called Tina Bar, which was open to the public. It was private, but everybody knew it was open to the public. And they're clearing a little bit of sand up. They're going to build a bonfire and going to roast hot dogs, all right? They're clearing the sand, and the guy says, he hit something with his hand, an 8-year-old kid. Pulls it out. Daddy, what's this? $6,000, that's what it is, in 3 bundles of 20s. But they're highly compressed and really torn up and rotted with holes in it and things like that. Money, wow, we're rich, our money is, our money troubles are over. Well, I don't think so, because they couldn't peel any of the bills apart. So it was kind of like, yeah, we found money, but it wasn't really quite money. And they hadn't heard of D.B. Cooper. This was on a Sunday. The next day, they're telling everybody, hey, we found this money on the beach cooking hot dogs yesterday. Well, something like that. And they go, well, maybe it's D.B. Cooper's money. Who's D.B. Cooper? So they call the cops. The cops say, oh, you got to talk to the FBI. The FBI says, do you have any serial numbers on it? And says, yeah. we'll be right over. So the FBI gets on the case Tuesday. They're out there in force, and they're digging. And they dig up the entire beach, and they find more money. But the other money that they find is itsy bitsy teensy weensy pieces of money spread all over the place, deep in the sand, 2, 3, 4 feet down, up and down the beach. And it's like, how'd the money get all the way around here? So we have two different kinds of money finds on the same beach. And this has confounded investigators, and nobody to this day has a good idea to explain any of that. You can say that the money bundles that were found, well, somebody buried it because they wanted to keep the story alive. Okay, but then what about the teensy weensy itsy bitsy pieces buried down 3 feet down? Well, I don't know about that. You know, so you could say, well, the Columbia River, a lot of freighters going up and down the river, and they got dredges, you know, to clear out the channel so the boats can up and down, and that dredge is going to suck up all that mud and throw it up on the beach. Maybe it sucked up D.B. Cooper and his money and spit it up on the beach, and it all got churned up and chewed up and like Cuisinart, you know, Okay, but how come 3 bundles are all together? Well, can't explain that either. Got a mystery. Get back to you on that one. And that's the status of things. Dredge, burial. Nobody knows, and nobody has any really good answers that are compelling. The Travel Channel did a story on that in August, and I'm part of it. So if you're watching in January, Travel Channel, Expedition Unknown with Josh Gates, look for me, and a couple other guys. There's a thinking going on. It's a revisionist view. And this is what you can do after 40 years of the FBI not solving the case. You can begin to rethink it. Since we don't know where the plane was at 8:13, and we're not 100% sure it was in Victor 23, maybe Bill Radachek, the guy flying the plane, looked at the map and saw, well, if D.B. Cooper's going to jump, I'm going to drop him in the Columbia River. And if you know the Columbia River, at Vancouver, it makes a right-hand turn and goes north for 40 friggin' miles, and it spreads out over into a whole delta, so there's ponds and marshes that in some places are 10 miles wide. And as Bill said, Bill wanted to fly out over the ocean to get to Mexico, and D.B. Cooper said, no water. Okay, so maybe Bill said, well, my plan B is I'm going to fly you over to Columbia. And as Bill told me, he says, I wanted to see Cooper, I wanted to drop him in the ocean, see how long he could tread water, holding his breath with 22 pounds of 20s around his waist, is what he told me. Okay, so that's another option. If Radachek is flying over that stretch of the Columbia, it would put him right over the beach at 8:13. Ooh, that looks pretty good. Okay, we're not quite sure how the money got to where it was found, but maybe we put Cooper and the money and the time all in one place if Radachek made this decision. Now the problem is Bill Radachek. He's still alive. And he has never said that he ever flew flying over the Columbia River. He talks about flying way over here over the Washougal River Valley. But funny thing about Bill Radachek is every time you talk to him, he changes the story a little bit. And in the History Channel documentary, he's all over the roadmap. It's like, Bill, oh, please, read my book. You can read what you said to me 10 years ago. Because it ain't what you're saying now, dude. You're 80, he's 89, so it's like, all right, maybe he's old. Okay. All right, so anyway, so that's the money found, the money find. Other researchers have gone down there, talked to other fishermen and things like that, and they said, well, I heard a story. When I was a kid, I was down here fishing for steelhead, and I remember some kid that was over here. I saw him every day. He told me that he found a bunch of 20s too, but he didn't think he just found parts, like someone had torn a corner off, and he said, maybe that was Cooper. I don't know. I didn't say him anything. So, you hear these little stories, but, you have to go, maybe that's just a story, because we also have 900 people that confess to being D.B. Cooper, so how do you really believe any of this, okay? By the way, I also want to give a shout out to the 1,100 women who have turned in their spouses who said their ex was D.B. Cooper, okay? And the FBI launched the largest, in their history, romantic quarrel investigation ever, okay? It's a lot better payback than a divorce, I'm here to tell you. So they have rooms full of files on all these deadbeat guys that women were turning in. All right. So they really don't have any legitimate suspects, which brings us to why they closed the case. And the answer is, I don't know. And we get into speculation. Is the FBI unable to solve D.B. Cooper? I find that hard to believe. Or are they just trying to get rid of something they've been covering up, or elements that they've been covering up for 45 years? Are there radar transcripts they don't want anybody to know about? For instance, how about if our radar system was so good, they saw exactly when D.B. Cooper jumped out of the plane, they saw him come down, they had 10, 15 minutes to get to the spot where he landed. By then they called in, yeah, we got him on radar, he's 3 miles south of Route 204, and you picked them up within minutes. Maybe that's how good our radar system is, but we don't want the Russians to know. Shut it down, okay? That could have happened. The reverse is also true. They had just installed $1 billion worth of new radar systems to track Russian bombers, okay? And it was active that night. But what if it didn't work? You have $1 billion boondoggle you don't want the American taxpayers to know, and you don't want the Russians to know that either. We couldn't find Cooper, and we can't track the Russian bombers either. So it could have been something like that. It could have been wacky, okay? Also, too, remember, jumping out of a 727 at 10,000 feet, 200 miles an hour, wing flaps at 15, landing gear down, the wheels down, is top secret information as of November 24th, 1971. If you were in charge of national security, what would you be telling the crew of Flight 305? Don't tell anybody anything till I get there, right? Pretty much, okay? Once you start shutting things down, what do you do the day after you start shutting things down? We'll get back to you on that. You shut down the shutdown, okay? You don't want anybody to be speculating, thinking about it or whatever, and you don't want it in the papers. And there's lots of other stuff to talk about. He beat the man, D.B. Cooper, outfoxed everybody, yada, yada, yada. Play that up, okay? Middle-aged guy, that was another thing. How many 45, 50-year-old men steal airplanes? Not too many. There were 14 copycats after D.B. Cooper. Almost all of them were in their 20s. Young guys. Want a little action. Dumb guys. They get caught. It's the older guys, pretty foxy. They get away with it. 3 guys that got away with the 3 copycats, the 3 guys who got away with this kind of skyjacking, D.B. Cooper, Richard McCoy, who got away with $500,000 because he asked for hundreds, same amount of money in terms of weight. He just asked for bigger denominations and got more money. But he couldn't keep his mouth closed. And he couldn't shut up his wife either. So, loose lips sank that ship. And a third guy, a guy by the name of Hanneman, Frederick Hanneman, got away. And he flew his plane to Honduras and jumped into the jungle. He was from Honduras. He was an American in Honduras. And he turned himself in a month later because he couldn't stand the guilt anymore. But he never gave in the money. As far as we know, the money's still at large. So we don't know how that came out. So a lot of little mysteries. So let's go to race ahead to 2016. FBI closes the case in July. Now, they closed the case at 5 p.m. on Friday, July 8th. And don't tell anyone. It's officially closed as of the close of business on Friday, July 8th. They send out press releases on Monday. Monday is the beginning of the first episode of the History Channel's 4-hour documentary on D.B. Cooper. Coincidence? Gee, I don't know. What do you think? Maybe. Okay. As it turns out, you start watching the show, the closing of the case is part of the documentary. You gotta be kidding me. I talked to the press agent. I said, the press officer for the FBI, I said, how did this happen? Can you tell me a little about it? She said, oh yeah, we get asked all the time, to be part of documentaries, and the History Channel called us, and we didn't want any part of it because we don't have any time because we're busy chasing, drug cartels and jihadists and yada, yada, yada. Even though the FBI, that's why they closed it. They said, we have to reassess our allotment of resources and distribute it to more pressing criminal enterprises. And I said, okay, but in the last couple years, you've opened up 80 offices, field offices in Europe and Asia. So you have enough manpower to do that. And you're planning to open up another 80 in the future in South America and Africa and everything like that. So you got plenty of guys, okay? You can't spare 1 or 2 guys for D.B. Cooper? Come on, give me a break. And I said, well, Mr. Smith, you just have to understand, blah, 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 blah. So what they told me was that they were evaluating how to tell the public in what would be the best way to let you folks know that they're closing the D.B. Cooper case. And they decided the best way is to piggyback on the History Channel documentary since everybody's going to watch it. How can you fight that logic? It's like, wait a second, guys, you're giving up on the case, you're throwing in the towel? Why? And I say, well, we've spent 45 years and we've run out of suspects, and the women have stopped trying to turn in their boyfriends. We get that, but and they get 900 guys have confessed. We get that too. But what have you done on your own? They haven't done much. They've waited for folks like you to bring in suspects to them. They're passive. They're reactionary in that regard. In the History Channel, if you're watching closely, this was specifically mentioned. Larry Carr, the case agent for D.B. Cooper from 2007 to 2010, he said, I treated this like a bank robbery. And what we do in a bank robbery is we publicly release all the information we have on the suspects, and we let the public bring the suspect to us. There you have it. There's their method of operation right there. Okay? Couldn't have said it any more simple than that. And that's what they do. Okay? One of the suspects that was brought to them is L.D. Cooper. Have you heard of him? Anybody know Marla Cooper? This goes back 5 years ago. In D.B. Cooper world, in the chat rooms, Marla Cooper is known as Twisty Butt. She's cute, 40-ish, blonde, tells a great story, looks good on camera, slept with the vice president of operations for ABC News, which broke the story. She told me that, so I'm not telling stories out of school here. I mean, I got that from her. And I believe the FBI has been looking for a way to dump the case. And they've been at this job of a psychological excoriation from the D.B. Cooper case in any way that made sense to them. I can tell you this, in 2011, when Marla Cooper walked through the door, they saw an opportunity. She said her uncle was D.B. Cooper, and his name is Lynn Doyle Cooper, and everybody in the family called him L.D. And the agents in Seattle, I think, said, L.D. Cooper is D.B. Cooper? And we have a blonde bombshell to tell the story? Where do we sign up? We want her. Bring her in. Okay? Who also sleeps with the guy from ABC. She's definitely our girl. All right? So in 2011, they released the information that we have found our most promising suspect, L.D. Cooper. The world went ape. Every newspaper in the world. FBI, most promising suspect. L.D. Cooper. Whoa. I had people coming up to me saying, hey, I hear they solved the D.B. Cooper case. The FBI solved it. I go, really? Yeah, they got him. He's from Oregon. His name is L.D. Cooper. Just like that. He changed one little letter around. L.D., D.B., whatever, blah, blah, blah. I said, I don't think so. Marla apparently had some kind of relationship with Curtis Eng, who's the current case agent on the D.B. Cooper case. And relationship, I don't mean necessarily sexual or anything like that. I mean, she had access to Curtis that was unprecedented. And she talked about it a lot, where she was in his office a lot. I can't confirm that. I can only tell you what she's saying, okay? And Curtis has not said anything other than the following. Public information officer, after they closed the case, when I was talking to them, I said, why did you pick now? And they said, we picked now. I'm going to paraphrase, okay, because she said it all in coded bureaucratic ease. I can't tell you specific names, but if you followed the media coverage of 2011, those individuals were high in our, the blah, 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 okay? What was told to me was that we continued our normal forensic investigation of that suspect, who I can't tell you his name, and it took us a long time. We weren't working on it every day or in a consistent manner, but it took us 5 years, and we came to our conclusion that he was not D.B. Cooper by the end of 2015. So in the beginning of 2016, in January, we contacted the History Channel saying, you still doing that documentary? Oh yeah, well, in a minute, we're gonna go, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, we wanna be part of it. We'll be right there, okay? And they said, we're closing the case. And so part of the History Channel documentary is the FBI taking their evidence and putting it in boxes and putting duct tape around it, packing tape, and shipping it off. And they kind of go, goodbye, D.B. Cooper. It's kind of like, why are you smiling and laughing? It was like a sing-songy kind of thing. It's like, I've been working on this case 8 years, man, and you're going, well, goodbye. Okay, so that was the closing of the case. I think they tried to bury it, and they sure did. Now the question is, where do we go from here? This may be a blessing in disguise. Now that the FBI has officially washed its hands of D.B. Cooper, the question is, where's all the information? Where's the evidence? Where are the files? And the answer is, I don't know. The longer answer is that eventually it's going to be heading to the Smithsonian. This is such a big story, and there's so much information. It's going to go to somebody's warehouse, like in the Indiana Jones movie, where you see these long warehouses filled with stuff. That's where D.B. Cooper is going, is into some warehouse somewhere in Virginia or Maryland or somewhere out in the boonies, okay? But when it gets there, then I can get to it. Because the FBI said, no, we don't want him. But if it's in the historian's hands, like the Smithsonian, then I can hook up with somebody from the University of Virginia or University of Maryland. It's like, let's go take a look at that D.B. Cooper stuff. What do you say? Oh yeah, good idea. I said, well, you're doing a research project on DNA. Let's check out D.B. Cooper's DNA, because they say they got some samples on that tie he was wearing. Okay, let's check that out. Or, remember that tie? Oh yeah, the tie. How about the metals that they found on the tie that they never pursued? They never mentioned titanium or bismuth in the 4 hours of the History Channel documentary. They never mentioned it for a second. So wow, we got a guy who knows how to lower the staircase, knows how to lower the flaps down to 15 degrees, keep the wheels down. He also has rare metals on his tie. Who is this guy? He's not your average Joe. We should be able to find him. The FBI says they have 3 samples of DNA. And I say, what have you done with it? Have you done any, if you've read National Geographic magazine from, I think, July of this year, you now know that, what we all know, is that even with partial samples, you can build genotypes and phenotypes. And phenotypes are is this guy Caucasian? Is he a man or a woman? Is it, you can begin to understand some of the basic fundamentals, gender, some ethnicities. Is he Jewish? Is he African? Is he Oriental? Are there percentages? And then you can get into genotypes, which is a little bit more finer. Northern European, Southern European, Native American. Have they begun to do that? And then we can take that a little step further. If you watch NCIS, you know that you can begin to reconstruct fingerprints. If you have a partial, you can begin to reconstruct from your partial what the other possibilities might be, the kinds of swirls that would be common in the print that you do have. You may end up with 20 or 50 or 100 different possibilities, but with the day and age of computers doing this and this and this like that, you can check out your whole database from all of these different possibilities. Do you get any hits on that? If you do, then who's D.B. Cooper? Check it out with the metals. Check it out with the DNA. How many places were there in the United States to actually get titanium on a tie? Not that many. Boeing? Yep. Maybe he worked for Boeing. That's where you would know the 727. Maybe he worked maybe he was a scientist. Maybe he was an engineer. Maybe he was upper management. Or maybe his father was upper management. Or his uncle was, or somebody like that. You can begin to start kind of piecing this together. Maybe somebody in the family was a commando who also worked a summer job in a metal foundry for Boeing's SST program that worked with titanium. You can begin to correlate some of this stuff. Is the FBI doing that? Not that they're telling anybody. They haven't told me, and they didn't put it in the History Channel documentary. So I've been talking for an hour, folks, and I think it's time for you to start asking some questions or for you to offer some comments or something like that. Sure, Diane.
Did he take the parachute on board, or was that brought on board with
Parachutes
the
were brought on board with the money. Okay, so the ransom deal was this. You give me $200,000 in cash, 2 front chutes, two back chutes and 2 front chutes. That was the term that he used. I'll give you your passengers back, and when I'm done, I'll give you the plane back. That was the deal. He kept his end of the bargain.
So the passengers were on the plane clear to Reno?
No.
They didn't?
They fly in. They fly into SeaTac. The money is brought on board. Passengers lets the passengers go. And there's some debate, there were 3 stewardesses on board, so the shaky one, she goes, all right, okay. And her boss, who was a woman by the name of Alice, who was in first class, and if you've flown planes, if you've been an airline stewardess, you know who a purser is? A purser who's in charge of the airline stewardesses and of the overall, has the primary responsibility for passengers. Alice also left with them, and Tina stayed on board specifically because to help with the stairs. He said, well, if I can't open the stairs on the ground, then I'm going to have to keep Tina, and she'll help me when we're in the air. So Tina had to stay on board. And that triggered the cockpit. The guys in the cockpit said, if Tina stays, we stay. So, yeah.
Were there any canine officers on the ground looking for him? Or lots of canine officers?
I haven't seen any pictures, and I've never been asked that, and I've never thought that, and that would be an interesting question. Back in 1971, there weren't a whole lot of dogs out there working in law enforcement. Nowadays, you would think there'd be a whole bunch. Yeah, at least. Yeah.
And the bomb thing wouldn't go off when he jumped out? Who knows if it was a bomb, huh? Just looked like it.
To the FBI's credit, I give them credit. They treated it as real, okay?
That's true.
At the time, there was lots of discussion within the FBI, is it real? And over time, that has grown because whatever looked like dynamite was wrapped, it was red. And in 1971, dynamite was in manila or brown wrappers, not red. Okay, and the guys who had worked construction or knew dynamite knew that. So they said, if it's red, it's not dynamite; it's a road flare. It's not real. But the answer the fundamental question is, you want to take a chance?
Yeah.
You going to take a chance? What happens if it blows up? day before Thanksgiving. All those football games, you're going to see nothing but a burning plane at SeaTac. I don't think so. Yeah. So, kid, you got a question? You got to raise that hand up high. Come on. What kind of parachute? The question is, we don't know. As you dig into the story, and in the book I go into this quite a bit, there's been a lot of controversy on the parachutes. For 40 years, a fellow by the name of Earl Casey said he owned the parachutes and he gave them to the airport, gave them to Northwest Orient. And the parachute, one of the parachutes that he gave was the one that was actually used by D.B. Cooper and was what he called was an NB-8, which stands for Navy Backpack 28-foot cylindrical parachute. An NB-8 is an emergency pilot's rig, and it's what Navy pilots wear, and it's easy to use. Casey said that he had modified it so that it wasn't easy to use anymore, which begs the question, why make it tougher to pull a ripcord on a parachute when your life's at stake, dude? You know? And he never had an answer for that. It is now known that Casey was lying. He didn't own the parachutes. He made everybody believe that he did, and he wanted to be part of the action. It is now known that the person who owned the parachutes was an acrobatic pilot by the name of Norman Hayden, who was known to principals at the airport because he flew a plane out of Renton Air Park, and was known to the aviation community. And the actual parachute that was used was a 28-foot Steinthal parachute made most likely to military specifications and was packed inside a Pioneer container. That's a lot of parachute information, but it took me a lot of time to get that information, so I'm giving it to you, all right? Because I spent, the chapter on parachutes took me a month to write. That's how complex these issues are, particularly when you have people lying to you, and the FBI agents are spouting the liar's testimony. So, and we now know that those were lies based on FBI documents. So now we have the confounding situation where we have FBI agents who don't read FBI documents, who are lying to the public unwittingly because they're spouting information that was told publicly by people who are lying. And it's like, why don't you guys read your own paperwork? What is your problem down there? And that's assuming that all the paperwork is truthful, which it isn't. There's been enough exploration of FBI files to realize that a lot of FBI documents are in conflict with each other. Conflict, incorrect, they're just not right. We have 3 different documents that put 3 people in the same seat. 18C was where Robert Gregory was sitting, D.B. Cooper, and Bill Mitchell. Two passengers and D.B. Cooper were all sitting in seat 18C, according to FBI documentations. And that simply cannot be true. As it turns out, from other kinds of, so you have to tease all this information out, okay? So that's what we got. Sure.
Can you tell me what kind of training did the FBI have? I mean, how long did they have training?
In 1971, all FBI field agents not only were college educated, but they all had legal degrees. They were all attorneys. They maybe not had passed the bar, but they all had JD degrees. So they were very well trained academically.
But they were, yeah.
And then they had to go into field training, which means they go back east to Quantico and they go through all that. And the extent of that kind of training, I don't know. And then when they come out into the field, then they have field training. And the extent of that, I don't know either. But I'm here to tell you, I spoke with the only guys who are really around now to talk about, because this happened 45 years ago. So to go back to somebody who was actually on the case, they were rookies. And basically what they did is they were gophers. They get coffee. That's your first job. That's your first year as an FBI agent, is you get the old guys coffee. And you pick up whatever you pick up on the way. You just watch and observe and ask questions and try not to cause trouble, and that's what being a cop is. But you got to jump through the hoops. You got to get the degree. Nowadays, in 1971, there was a switch. Not only did you need a JD degree, you could also probably accounting, and that was J. Edgar Hoover's big push, was to get into real white collar crime and to get at the mafia and stuff like that. So accounting and tax people and finances and all of that. And he made a big push for that. Nowadays, it's my understanding, you can be pretty much anything. Certainly computers is big, so computer science, anybody that can really, do that stuff.
You should have got Mr. Monk.
I was thinking
just
James
watched him
Bond.
last winter. Some people just have that net, they Sherlock Holmes and just people like that,
They don't exist. I'm here to tell you, I've never seen one. I've never seen one. When you think of an FBI agent, when I think of an FBI agent, think of an English teacher who is arrogant, smug, and narcissistic, who likes guns. I'm here to tell you, that's as close as I can make to a representation of an FBI agent. Confidence way overblown, thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, and quite frankly, never thinks that his shit ever stinks.
Yeah, I want to work for the FBI.
No, you don't, Ray. No, you definitely don't. I can tell you that.
Is there a possibility that he maybe had a water aircraft available if he was that close to water?
Well, there's compelling information. Here's a great scenario. The History Channel's broadcast has unleashed a whole new bunch of armchair sleuths. I'm getting calls at least once a week. I figured it out. I got D.B. Cooper. I know who it is. All right. And half of them are screwballs. The other half are compelling. And you don't know which one. Okay. Are you turning in? Is your girlfriend turning you in? This one guy, his name is Bill Collins. He's an engineer. He lives in West London, New Hampshire. And he's done everything by Google. He has never been to Washington State. So he doesn't know Tina Bar from Vancouver or the Columbia River at all. Okay. But here's the scenario. This is all based upon known information and Google Maps. D.B. Cooper comes in with a pickup truck and a camper and 2 boats on a trailer. He's got an Alumacraft. You know what an Alumacraft is? It's basically a fishing boat. It's aluminum with a 20 horsepower motor. Comes in, and with a Zodiac, which is an inflatable that he has deflated inside the Alumacraft. Comes into Tina Bar, uses that as his base of operations, which people would camp out there. He drives up to Merwin Dam, which has lights on top, and he knows that if he can get below the cloud cover, he'll see the lights of Merwin Dam. He's a pilot, so he has directional equipment, so he's able to triangulate, so he knows where he is. Even though the pilots aren't sure where he is, D.B. Cooper feels that he knows where he is. This is highly contentious. Most scientists disagree with Bill on this, that small directional devices were not available in 1971. They are now, but not in 1971. So Cooper wouldn't have known where he was with the precision to be able to find the Merwin Dam. But Bill says Cooper went there, parked the Alumacraft, went hiking for weeks through the woods so he knew he could find his way, came back on the day of the hijacking, left Tina Bar, Zodiac from Tina Bar up the Columbia to Portland Airport, which is right on the river. In 1971, there wasn't much there. A couple of marinas. 205 wasn't even being built. No fences. You could walk right up and touch an airplane. Hey, buddy, where you going? Okay. He walks up. That's how come the FBI never, to this day, doesn't know how D.B. Cooper got to the airport. Bill says he took a boat and then walked across the runway. All right. And then walked right up the 727, had the staircase on the ground. All right. Does the hijacking. The Zodiac is still at the airport. Do I have this right? Jumps, has his money, walks to Merwin Dam, gets in the boat, comes down the Lewis River in the Alumacraft, comes up to Tina Bar, and gets in his truck, and the next day drives and gets the Zodiac, packs up the Zodiac, and is gone. He's got yeah. On paper, it's slicker than spit, okay? So nobody sees him coming, and nobody sees him going. He doesn't have any roadblocks. By the way, the night of the skyjacking, as far as I can tell, no roadblocks or checkpoints established on the roads. Only thing given were verbal warnings, don't pick up any hitchhikers on the I-5.
Wow.
D.B. Cooper's somewhere in the area. Yeah. 1971 was a different world.
Oh,
okay? The FBI wasn't even sure they really had a guy until, on the loose until Reno. That was 11 o'clock at night, the night before Thanksgiving. Wheels didn't really crank into gear. No cell phones, no internet, no emails, no Google, none of that. Everything's by phone.
So you think he picked the night before Thanksgiving on purpose?
You betcha.
He was
Smart
gonna
guy.
Slow everything down.
Yep, yep, yep. And that's what the special ops guys say. I pick that day. If that or Christmas, one of the other, pick them. If you're gonna do something big, do it on a big day. The bureaucracies just slow down. I talked to Bill Mitchell. Bill Mitchell was sitting. Bill Mitchell was a 20-year-old college kid. He's 63 now. He's the youngest surviving passenger from the flight. He was a college kid returning from the University of Oregon. And he sat in 18B, and Cooper was sitting in 18, across the aisle in row 18. And so Mitchell was considered to be the person who got the best unaffected view of D.B. Cooper, because he never knew that there was a skyjacking. Stewardesses knew there was skyjacking, so they feel that their anxieties colored their perspectives, that some things would be hyper accentuated. Florence is still to this day so agitated, her testimonies are basically thrown out the window. It's like, that girl's too loosey-goosey.
The plane, the 727 is a real small plane. It's just got the middle aisle just enough where you gotta turn sideways, and then there's the
That has 3 seats on either side.
but they're- yeah.
6 seats to a row.
Small,
Yeah, yeah. But the 727 that Cooper was on only had 18 rows. That's not a lot of seats. Because nowadays you fly a 757, you're sitting, row 35. I'm going to New York for Christmas. I got a seat on 35D. I'm way back by the galley. I can go get my coffee by myself.
A 777 was real nice if you can get one of those. So, I'll tell you about it.
Tell me later. Okay. Okay. Anything else? Shall we go? Wrap it up? Great. It's been my pleasure. Thanks very much for coming out.